At the sound of the flying clipper ship bells, Pan American World Airways presents...
I suppose we're what you'd call typical Americans. Love hamburgers, chocolate sodas, and travel. Most of all, travel. So we decided to investigate the different kinds of planes flying to Europe, because that's where we wanted to go.
Now then, here we have a model of the double-deck Clipper, the last word in luxury flying. As you can see, the passenger compartments are on two levels, which make possible to move out a bit, stretch your legs. You can go downstairs to the lounge, or you can go upstairs to your seat or sleeper. The top deck here is the regular seating space, which is more than enough room for 61 people. These cabins over here are the dressing rooms. And down here, we have the lounge and bar, where you can have a friendly chat with your fellow passengers.
That convinced us. So a month later, we took the double-decked Clipper. The upper deck was comfortable, but to stretch our legs, we went downstairs where we met some interesting people, among them Irving Hartley, a film producer.
Well, after those instructions, Irving, I ought to be able to win an Academy Award.
Listen, darling, I'll be perfectly satisfied if you get 2 or 3 shots in focus.
Oh.
Well, we'll run into each other in London, and if you need any help, you just sing out.
Oh, thank you.
Say, you know, we ought to be landing about this time. By golly, there's England down there now.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes, it's true what they say. It's quicker by Clipper. Yes, there were the green turfed fields of England, the gentle hills where men had flourished for over 2,000 years. We had the feeling that we were not strangers, that in a way we were coming home, because every town and valley is packed with history that's our common legacy. The Houses of Parliament, Westminster Abbey, the Thames, the Victoria Embankment, St. Paul, all are names as familiar to us as Times Square or the Golden Gate. On that first morning, as we walked out onto the balcony of our West End hotel, we were a little overcome by the fact that we were in London at all. Yesterday, New York's East Side, today, London's West End. It's a magic world, and the panorama that spread before us was magic, too. We decided to let the day take care of itself and travel about with no special aim. We wanted first to see Piccadilly Circus, said to be the center of the world. But even the center of London is difficult to find without a map. So we consulted the one given us on the Pan American Clipper. It always amuses me that in the heart of London there should be a statue to the god of love. The last place on earth I'd expect to find it. But there he is, Eros, looking down on swirling traffic, concrete, and lots of plate glass. The flower girl is still there, but the old houses are gone. And unless you remember that Scott and Byron and Johnson lived in Piccadilly, you might miss feeling the surge of history under the modern current of life. I said east, and she said west. Well, anyhow, this was a good chance to see if the London bobbies lived up to their reputation for politeness.
You seem to be a bit confused. Can I help you?
Well, I'm sure you can, officer.
Officer, we want to go to St. Paul's Cathedral, and my husband says it's that way, and I'm sure it's that way. Isn't that right? And we want to go to the Law Courts and the Bank of England and Buckingham Palace and Westminster Abbey and the Tower of London.
No, madam, you haven't got a helicopter, have you?
No.
If you cross the road, take the third turning on the right-hand side, it will bring you to the Travel Association. They'll be able to help you.
Oh,
Thank you
so
very much.
Trafalgar Square was our first stop. We left the National Gallery till later. And then to St. Paul's. It's still standing, even though everything around it was demolished. Somehow, surrounded by emptiness, it breathes the greatness of England even more than before. Nothing left now but a ground pattern of rectangles with a wall jutting up here and there. and then down the Mall to Buckingham Palace, for everyone wants to see the changing of the guards at least once. England is one of the few countries in the world where soldiers still wear elaborate dress uniforms. I've heard that if you search for it, you can find, worn as a regular dress, some costume of nearly every period from the reign of Henry VII to that of Queen Victoria. Whoever designed these fur hats had never heard the word functional, but the originator of this stomping of the feet called square bashing must have had a practical motive, and a foot warmer. Westminster Abbey is England's Valhalla. The enmities of 20 generations lie buried here, Elizabeth beside Mary, whom she beheaded. Remember Beaumont's poem? Think how many royal bones sleep within this heap of stones. Here they lie, at realms and lands, who now want strength to stir their hands. The Houses of Parliament are near the Abbey, and architecturally they harmonize perfectly, even though they weren't built till 1834. Of course, you recognize Tower Bridge. And on the other side of the Thames, the Tower of London, fortress, royal palace, state prison, and now a barracks and museum. Imagine, it's been in continuous occupation for over 8.5 centuries. A long catalogue of famous people have died here. Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, Sir Walter Raleigh, Lady Jane Grey. At this very gate, Traitor's Gate it's called, Anne Boleyn fell on her knees and cried to God for help. This is the very spot where many of the great were beheaded. I suppose if any place on earth is haunted, this is it. The yeoman warders of the tower still wear their famous livery, including the symbols of the Tudor rose, the Scotch thistle, and the Welsh leek. We cornered one of them and learned a little more about the history of the tower.
Who was it who actually built this tower?
Well, there are some would have you think that it was Julius Caesar who built the tower. But it was William the Conqueror who built it. And he used part of the old Roman wall which was built by Julius Caesar.
It's had a fascinating history, hasn't it?
Yes, they say the stones were put together with lime mixed with blood. Well, there has been enough blood spilled here for that.
What else has it been used for besides the prison?
It has been a palace and even a zoo. In one of these towers, they kept wild lions. Yes, and some poor human souls have been cased up in there until they chopped their heads off in the block or broke their bones in the wheel. They beheaded the Earl of Essex, Sir Walter Raleigh, Lady Jane Grey, and Queen Anne Boleyn. I've seen Anne Boleyn carrying her head underneath her arm, and poor King Henry VI, who was stabbed while he was at prayer. They come at night, they do. Their names are here on the walls. Aye, and their ghosts too. It was here, in this room, they say, that the little princes were murdered. Smothered they were, right here as they lay in bed.
If you're tired of stone and history, there are the perfect trees and green velvet of London's many parks. St. James's is the most beautiful park in London, and therefore one of the great sights of the world, for an English park is something special. Neither artificial, like a French park, nor completely natural, but a compromise between the two. To a Londoner, it's his paradise lost in town. If St. James's is the most beautiful, Hyde Park is the most many-sided. The corner near the Marble Arch is London's Forum. From a dozen little rostrums, torrents of words are hurled at an audience which seems to gather for the sole purpose of baiting the speaker. It's an impressive spectacle, this tolerance of the crowd for any opinion, exclusively and typically English. We ran into Irving Hartley again in Hyde Park. We'd seen him once before, and he'd found London a very difficult place to photograph because it looks its best in a low, soft light. He wanted to capture some of the misty beauty Whistler saw there, but unfortunately, color film isn't up to it yet. We went with him to see Trooping the Colors, the annual ceremony on the King's birthday. King George, in a fur hat, rode in an open carriage with Princess Elizabeth beside him on horseback. After a good deal of parading at fast tempo, the men go into a slow march that's unusually impressive. We were beginning to understand that no one ever can know London thoroughly, for it means something different to everyone. It's full of unbelievable variety, absolutely modern, absolutely medieval, absolutely 18th century, or absolutely middle-class Victorian, according to your point of view. And so the days passed, and the time had come when we must leave London and go to see the countryside. Irving came along to get a shot of our departure that Donnie wanted for her film record. We smiled for the camera's sake, but we weren't as happy as we looked because London grows on you, and we hated to leave. Many people begin by disliking it, but no one can really know London without loving it. As Dr. Johnson declared, when a man is tired of London, he is tired of life, for there is in London all that life can afford. We got another view of Big Ben and Westminster Palace, better known as the Houses of Parliament, rising in their grandeur. A short and pleasant boat ride takes you to Hampton Court. William III wanted to make Hampton Court his Versailles, but fortunately he failed, and the beautiful Tudor buildings with their fantastic chimneys were left intact. If you bone up a bit on history, you'll enjoy England a lot more. Imagine Henry VIII's greedy ears perk up as Wolsey explains that this clock records not only the time of day, but the phases of the moon, the tides, the seasons, and perhaps even the progress of the solar system through space. We reach back even farther into the past at Windsor, for it is said that it was in a castle on this hill that King Arthur established his round table. Today, the modern knights who play in the river are likely to be from Eton, for that famous public school is just across the Thames. As we in America understand the term, Eton is not public at all, but thoroughly private for the sons of gentlemen. The buildings are old and beautiful and so venerable that their Eton jackets and silk hats seem most appropriate. It was this playing field of which the Duke of Wellington spoke when he said, "The Battle of Waterloo was won here." Oxford University is on the Charvel River, and punting on the Char is a delightful way to absorb the atmosphere. Teaching began here 1,000 years ago. Think of that. The scholars of that day would be astonished at such things as films and airplanes, but they might be even more astonished to know that their inspiration has lived on unchanged. Rudeness is rare in England. Almost everyone's polite and obliging. One of the students, knowing we were strangers, volunteered to take us about.
How do you like planting on the Charwell?
Well, it was certainly a new experience for us.
But it was marvelous. I just loved it.
You've certainly chosen a lovely day for it.
It's been beautiful.
We enjoyed our stay at the Boars Hill Hotel, which was typical of the many charming inns throughout England. After a delicious lunch, David took us about in his MG. Everyone talks about the beauty of Oxford, but Yeats put it best when he said, "So beautiful one expects the people to sing instead of speaking." We shivered a bit at the thought of the great number of famous men who had walked through Devil's Passage. Roger Bacon, Matthew Arnold, John Henry Newman, Shelley, Moore, Addison, Gibbon.
This is New College. It's still called that, though it was built about 1380. We have another endowment here, some time ago, one of your Rhodes scholars from the southern states left a fund for juleps.
It must have been Kentucky.
Once every year, they're served to everyone in the college hall. But I can't say that I like them myself. Perhaps that's because we Britishers don't really know how to make them properly.
I wish I had more time. I'd make you a real Kentucky mint julep, and I know you'd like that. But I think we'd better push on. You see, we're going up to Stratford. We said goodbye to our student friend, and not without qualms, took to our bikes. England is the perfect country for cycling. No form of travel can compare with it in a place where something interesting is to be found on every side lane, and where glamour inns and tea lawns are common wayside lures. Anyone who visits a foreign country after having become familiar with its painters is struck with astonishment at seeing how much the land resembles the pictures of it. The whole country looks like a great park, extremely civilized and man-made. There are no high mountains and no extensive plains, just hills of varying height. The light and weather are forever changing, and nature is human and hospitable. Great Kew. English names are a delight for two reasons. They're quaint and they're familiar like an old song. Well, the most ardent foe of quaintness would soften if he saw this Cotswold village. The cottages, roofed with thatch, are built about a green, which is the center of communal life. Age has touched the houses with a gentle caress, which adds a great deal to their charm. We learned later that one writer had called Great Kew the most beautiful village in the world, and I'm inclined to agree with him. In olden times, the green was the place for festivals and for carrying out justice. Donnie spied the stocks and decided it was time to put me in my place. Apart from the birds, which sang lustily, the whole place seemed half asleep. But in a wayside inn, you always get a cheerful greeting. We'd always dreamed of going to Stratford, so we saved that till last. Stratford was just an old market town of no consequence until the alderman's son set the world on fire. The roof sagged with the use of centuries, and the shutters on its oldest house looked like a drop-leaf table. We were surprised to learn that Shakespeare was born in such an elegant house. He went to school in this guild hall. No doubt it was here that he first saw the strolling players who fired his imagination. Not far away is Anne Hathaway's cottage, a cottage of 14 rooms, no less. It probably hasn't changed much since Shakespeare came courting up this very path, he hardly 18 and Anne 26. They were married for more than 30 years when Shakespeare died in 1616. He was laid to rest here in Holy Trinity. The Avon flows on down to the Memorial Theater, where an excellent cast performs his plays. Next trip, we'll arrange it differently, but now we had to head back to Piccadilly and the Pan American office to pick up our mail.
One sees such interesting people at the Pan American offices.
You're right, dear. One does meet interesting people in the Pan Am offices.
Hello, Lee. How are you?
Fine, how are you?
And Donnie, how are you? Say, since I last saw you two, I've been all over Belgium.
Belgium, Irving. Tell us all about it. We may be going there ourselves. Is it true what they say about Brussels?
I don't know what they say about it, but I say it's one of my favorite places.
Then you're the man we've been looking for. Give us a blow-by-blow description.
Oh, I like everything about both Luxembourg and Belgium. My schedule took me first to Luxembourg, the pearl of all Europe for beauty. Actually, at first glance, it looks like a miniature. And then you realize that this is real. Luxembourg is a tiny country, very hilly, very picturesque. It has been patiently coddled, coaxed, trimmed, manicured, barbered, and upholstered until from end to end it looks like somebody's private estate. or else like a made-to-order composition for a painter. The Grand Duchy of Luxembourg has its share of ruined castles, and I confess a weakness for ruins. Not so much because they're photogenic as because they stimulate me to try to reconstruct the past. The castle at Vianden dates from the 13th century. Think what prayers and scandal, what sorrow and laughter those walls have heard. Of course, ruins are wonderful to photograph, too. The architectural details at Vianden were of several periods, showing how it had grown through the centuries. Yes, sir, I repeat with emphasis. Luxembourg is one of the most pictorial countries I've ever seen. I urge you not to miss it. You ask about Brussels. Well, Brussels is to me one of the most delightful capitals in all Europe. It has a mood of optimism that acts like a tonic. The Grand Place, the center of old Brussels, is dominated by the town hall, or Hotel de Ville, as they call it. It was begun in 1410, and it's in a rich Gothic architecture that makes it the pride of the Low Countries. In the square, they held splendid tournaments in the 15th century. Age has so darkened the buildings that it's impossible to get a good light reading for color photography. But I found the sculpture and architectural details irresistible. Ancient guild houses surround the square. There's the Hall of Archers, the greasemakers, the coopers, the skippers, and so on. And, of course, there's always the people. The people of Brussels, and of all Belgium, for that matter, are energetic, progressive, optimistic. This was one of the most pleasant surprises to me. I'd never known any Belgians before. Sand painting is an art found in Belgium that I'd never seen before. The artist works with colored sands that he sifts out between his thumb and forefinger with the most remarkable skill. The sketch he did for me took about 30 minutes. But when they're working on something more ambitious that they want to preserve, they spend 5 or 6 weeks. The sand can be fixed with some sort of glue size. The pièce de résistance of all Belgium for me was Bruges. From the top of the belfry, you look down on what is practically a medieval city. It's sometimes called Bruges-la-Mort, the dead city, because it was once a thriving commercial center. That was before Columbus discovered America. Today, everything is still and peaceful, and Bruges, no longer of commercial importance, is the picturesque capital of West Flanders. It's also called the Venice of the North because of its network of canals. At every turn, there's something to remind you of the blight which fell on the city when its trade was lost due to the silting up of the river Zwin, its waterway to the sea. The faded colors, the time-worn brickwork, the indescribable look of decay. It's all very sad and pathetic, and yet strangely beautiful. Today, artists come to wander about the narrow streets with their curious step-gabled houses and old buildings, which bear such eloquent testimony to the ruin that overtook what was once a powerful and opulent city. Art flourished as the town grew richer, and the Van Eycks, Memling, David, and many other great painters were attracted by its splendor. There's an excellent Memling museum where many of the master's works are preserved. It's interesting to see that even though most of the subjects are biblical, Memling used costumes and backgrounds contemporary to his time. Everyone has heard of Bruges lace. The lace makers are, to me, more interesting than their product. They are usually sweet little old ladies with faces like a portrait by Holbein. It's remarkable that their withered hands can still travel so fast. If Bruges is the highlight of Belgium, the procession of the Holy Blood is the highlight of Bruges. Every window, every inch of pavement is packed by the devout and curious. Pious visitors from all parts of Europe are there. First, you see Adam and Eve driven from the Garden of Eden. The first hour of the procession shows key scenes from the Old and New Testament. Some are tableaus, some are actually acted out.
Ja, dat beweerde ik. Maar wat hadden we nog meer getuigenissen nodig? Hebben het zelf uit zijn eigen mond niet gehoord dat hij de zoon van de levende God was. Wat zou hij de zoon van God zijn?
Each year, the monk who takes the part of Christ does it as a form of penance. This cross is solid wood and so heavy that the monk fainted 17 times in the 2 hours of the procession. That which impressed me most was the vivid force of the whole atmosphere. I felt it wasn't a pageant, a spectacle that I was watching, but an act of worship in which the actors and the spectators were as one. The climax of the whole ceremony is the passing of the shrine of the Holy Blood, borne by 2 bishops. At the end, the participants and the people assemble before the chapel of the Holy Blood. It was all very moving, a fitting climax to my visit.
Well, that sounds too good to miss. Say, can we fly from here to Brussels by Clipper?
Well, of course. How about that?
Why, surely. It's only an hour away. You can fly from London to Brussels and then go down to Paris. From there, there's a wonderful trip you can take down through the Chateau country. End up at Nice on the Riviera. Spend some time there, and then go home the southern route. Marseille, Barcelona, Lisbon, Santa Maria, and home that way.
How would you like that?
Need you ask? Irving, you've certainly sold us on Belgium.
Good. Well, I must be running along.
We'll tell you how we liked you when we see you at home. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.
Happy flying.
It always is. So long.
Bye.
We followed Irving's advice, and after a marvelous week on the Riviera, left Nice and flew the southern route home.